Thank you, everyone, for coming. Really quick, kind of to set the stage here, we all know that e-commerce continues to be a massive driver of growth in our economy. We just passed the $1 trillion mark last year. And one of the biggest beneficiaries of that growth has been the onset of commerce media, which eMarketer tabbed to do $45 billion last year. We look at it as both a channel, so retail media as its own channel, but we also see it as a layer where you can take the data from the retail media and leverage it across existing channels. And the benefits are many: privacy compliance, full funnel attribution, new and improved consumer insights. But there's much work to be done. We're going to be discussing some of the hurdles today, and we're also going to be talking about a lot of the opportunities ahead of us. Someone who's been talking about this for a long time is our first guest today, Sir Martin Sorrell. So the first question today, this actually comes from an event that I attended in 2018. I was in the audience. You were a keynote speaker at the time, and you made the claim that Amazon was going to build a $100 billion advertising business. And I vividly remember laughs in the audience. Mm-hmm. I think the last number we just discussed is 40 billion.
I think they did 41 last year, no, the year before last. And if you project out what they were doing through Q1, Q3, I think they did 22% increase in Q1, 21 in Q2, and 25 in Q3. But they'll get to somewhere near, I think your figure was north of 50. The figure I use is 50. But
so I guess you're the one laughing.
Halfway there. Halfway there. Still a half to go, which I think they will still achieve. No, I think it's sort of inevitable. We'll get into this maybe a little bit more, but this week I think is a seminal moment for you and others when Google deprecates finally. And I can remember I was in all places, Saudi Arabia. I'll never forget it, in January of 2020, just before COVID hit. And the second blog came from a Google engineer that they were going to deprecate third-party cookies. And we were on a group call with somebody at Google after that second blog. And, the plan was to do it within 2 years, mm-hmm. right? So that by the end of 2022, it should have been done. And of course, they delayed it. And clients, this is also important from a retail media point of view because it will stimulate the demand, it will tickle the demand. Clients, have been, and we benefited from it in a small way, have been focused on first-party data, how do they integrate it, but I would say the level of preparedness for it, despite the fact it's been going since before 2020, sure. In 2019 and before. And despite everybody knew it was coming, they've sort of been in denial. That's one thing. And the second thing is it's quite difficult for clients to do it mm-hmm. because they have different, they've grown by acquisition, or they've had different CIOs or CMOs or chief digital officers, all have had their own, it's like the spaghetti at the back of a television set that everybody's plugging in their own opinions, their own system and opinions. So that's the problem that most clients have, is that they talk about first-party data and they talk about the need to integrate it, but the practical problem, and you have to write off a lot of money. It's not necessarily a cash write-off, but you have to take a hit with your shareholders if you're going to write off all these subgrade systems and have, or maybe come in with a new system, which is perfect. So retail media will benefit, in my view, as a result of that. So Amazon and others. We talked a little bit about Walmart. As best as I can remember, the only figure I've seen is that Walmart might be generating about $3 billion from advertising. So let's get the figures right for a minute because it's important. Mm-hmm. So the world advertising media market's about $950 billion, and digital is probably around 650 of that, so it's about 65%, trending to 70% by 25. So mm-hmm. by next year we should be at 70%. This year probably halfway between 65 and 70%. Figures aren't perfect. Google will be probably 225 billion last year. Meta will be 125, and Amazon will be 50. So 400 out of the 650 is in the three Western platforms. Then we've got Alibaba, Tencent, and ByteDance or TikTok. Then you sort of drop down because TikTok, I think, probably is doing about 40, and talking about commerce, of course, they're going heavily into commerce now,
right.
driven by Shine and by Tamer. But it's probably TikTok, as best as we can figure out, is about 14 billion last year versus 10 billion. This is outside China. Mm-hmm. ByteDance probably is 90 billion, so including that outside China figure for TikTok, having been 60 billion the year before. And then you drop down to, Snap might be, I think, about 6 billion. Twitter has gone from 5 to 2.5. Pinterest around 4. Walmart 3. I think Microsoft is probably around about 11. And Apple around 7. And when you look at those numbers, what hits you in the eye, and people in the ad business, there was an article in the papers this week, so some guy from I won't say who it was CEO of a UK agency, said, life has become more complicated. It hasn't become more complicated, it's become more simple, right? Because if you think about the digital advertising market,
down to 3.
It's those 3 Western and 3 Chinese.
Yeah.
They're the game.
Specific to retail media, where is this budget coming from?
I think the thing that drives clients nuts is trade discounts. The discount. I mean, I always remember, it's a long, long time ago. If you remember Nestle, they always used to show their margins on gross. So revenues before discounts. Right? And this is when I think Peter Brabeck was running the company. So it's a long, long time ago. And they always got criticized by analysts. It's a bit like Omnicom with, Omnicom reports gross revenues, not net revenues. Right. And the reason John Wren does that, and you can quote me, is he likes to try and keep his margins lower, because that will make clients feel a little bit better about
get a better deal.
Extortionate prices that he's charging. Sure. Anyway, but really the figure is the net revenue. So what Nestle did was they did it for better reasons, because they wanted their people to focus on the discounts, because any bozo can discount a product and sell it. Right. But to get the full value, but they got criticised because their margins were low. So they got sick and tired of that. So they went back to looking at areas. So it's the same sort of issue that the agencies face.
So you mentioned AI and AGI. I know that you have some opinions on that. I'd love to hear most recent opinion.
Well, we see 5 things happening in our own business. And they're in various states of maturation. So clearly, visualization and copywriting. We launched here. Sarah's here with me, and we launched a thing called Monks.flow or Monks Flow, which is a tool or series of tools for improving the efficiency around visualization and copywriting. So very simple. What took us months, 3 weeks, months, whatever, takes us a few hours.
Right.
That's a two-edged sword, because procurement departments and some clients say, you sell time, we don't sell outputs, which we should get around to doing. Right. Well, you sell time, you less time, so
less money.
It's cheaper. So that's a two-edged sword. That's one. Second thing is hyper-personalization, highly relevant to retail commerce. And that, for Netflix, we might produce 1.5 million assets, at least in theory, for any series, like any of the series that we might do. Now we can do multiples of that. We might not use only 50, 70,000 of those assets, but we're now going to do multiples of that. So personalizing media in an even more effective form, that will affect retail media too. The third area is media planning and buying. This is big, and nobody talks about this because Turkeys don't vote for Christmas.
Sure.
And so if you've got 10,000 people in or 15,000 people in a planning and buying network, you're not going to say that you're going to chop out jobs. But much of the process is semi-automated or manual. and therefore it lends itself to algorithmic analysis, particularly on the digital side. So I think that's going to come, and you already see it with what is called Advantage Plus at Meta and Gmax at Google. They do talk about it, but the numbers actually, if you look at the numbers for Meta in Q3 of last year on Advantage Plus, they were huge, the growth.
Right.
And that's for small and medium-sized businesses. They don't talk about enterprise, because if they talk about enterprise, they might disturb the ecosystem with the holding companies, but in my view, it's going to come. So that's big. The fourth area is general efficiency. So we have an exclusive arrangement with NVIDIA, with AWS, and with Adobe for outside broadcasting. So typically, when you do an outside broadcast, you do the Michigan game, for example, you'd hire an outside broadcasting truck. It would cost you about $7 million. You'd amortize it over 5 years, so it might cost you about $1.5 million a year. We can do the same thing with a cloud-based solution exclusively with exclusive integration partner for that with NVIDIA and AWS and Adobe for about $100,000 a year. So it's about a 90% cost reduction. So that's general efficiency.
Sure.
And the fifth area where we see AI having a huge impact is on what I call the democratization of knowledge, which means that everybody in the organization will have access to knowledge.
Sure.
That is huge.
We could go on for ever, but we do got to be aware of everyone's time. So at this time, could we get the panel up here? Thank you very much for that,
Pleasure.
Mr. Martin. I appreciate that.
Thank you.
Hello. So just a quick intro to the panel. Thank you very much for joining us, by the way. We have Susan Rothwell, Chief Revenue Officer of Epsilon. We have Josh Winkler, SVP Global Partnership Solutions at Fanatics. And we've got Jay Askinasi, CEO of PMX US. So this first question is going to kind of be for all four of you. Again, we got agency, we have data, we've got retail, and there's no right, wrong answer here. But from where you sit, where are you seeing the biggest benefits of commerce media? And Martin, if you want to pass the torch to.
You want me to go first? Oh.
Yes.
I think the biggest benefits, right, are obviously the fact that as consumers, they want to be able to instantly, react to something they want to buy. So you have that ability when you're in social to quickly or on a platform be able to respond. And then for the advertiser, right, the ability to use that data to be really speaking to that consumer on a very personal level. And we know that with all the changes in data and everything that's happening with cookies, that consumers are being more fickle about what we put in front of them and what they react to. So I think that personalization and that ability to really tune into what that consumer is interested in, why, and get them to react and buy will be something that really moves that market and changes that.
I just want to state we don't work at Omnicom or gouge compliance publicists.
I wasn't saying that gouging. I was just saying they want to hire excess, hide excess.
I get it. So obviously agree with everything that's been said. I would also say the prep for cookieless world, which is obviously real finally, and being able to utilize first-party data in a real way is compelling. And then also, there's still a ton of crap in the programmatic ether. I think everyone knows that, MFA, and just a ton of questionable environments or just not high quality environments. So I think as cookies completely go away, retail media is a well-lit environment. And I think you'll see more brands go there, even if they're not endemic to the space. Today, most of the money there is still endemic. So I just think there's a lot of upside purely from an environmental and data perspective.
Yeah, I mean, we find within the vendors or licensees that are working with us, I mean, it's an opportunity for them to activate mid to low funnel in a way that isn't, it's wounded to the fabric of the website, the marketing activations. It's not too in your face. It's contextually relevant for them. And I mean, it really drives typically incremental sales on their behalf. So it's something that, our biggest opportunity is to iterate on that and provide more and more better opportunities for our licensees and vendors.
Yeah, I think that's a really important point because I think clients have become much more short-term. and will continue to be. They're very much performance-orientated, activation-orientated. And this, at least in theory, is easier to measure and easier to see the returns. And a lot of CEOs are saying to their CMOs, why am I bothering with all this brand stuff up here in the upper funnel? I have to go and talk to institutions every quarter or private equity every month.
Yeah.
And they're driving me for performance.
Exactly right.
So the growth is impressive, and as the ad agency, how do you prepare your clients for this? What's the message you're telling them? I mean, because this is clearly, we mentioned some of the benefits of this, but how are you preparing them?
I'd say that over the last 2 years, let's say, there's no question it's the question or the topic that we get asked most about by our clients. And more for give us a 101, what's going on in the space, who are the players, how do we do it, where does it sit in the organization, terminology that's confusing, means different things to the same people. So I'd say that, as a marketing consultant for our clients, being able to educate and explain the market is our number one job. And I think you have to lay a baseline for everyone. And that started mostly in CPG for all the obvious reasons. But really the last year or so, every one of our clients, even as a retailer, wants to stand up one of these businesses because of the high margin accretive nature of that to their bottom line. They're seeing, pressure on the street, et cetera. So now it's also help me stand up a business. So that's a different conversation than an agency's used to having. So we're having both, but it's just definitely education is still the number one thing that we're thinking about.
There's sort of three things I think that the clients have to think about today. What one is to be as agile as possible, and being close to the consumer with retail media, I guess, fits that bill to some extent. So agility is huge. I mean, every CEO talks about their organization being agile until you have to
be agile.
Deal with them.
Right.
If they knew what we knew about their own organizations, I think they would have kittens.
Yep.
So that's one. The second thing is that they have to take back control of what they did. So I think after the great financial crisis, it's the Jorge Lehman 3G zero-based budgeting, which wasn't new. They were teaching that at business school 70, 80 years ago, but it was in a new form. And that became the topic du jour. So you outsourced everything. And what's happening is you have to, we're not, it may sound strange coming from an agency person, but in-housing is not the enemy, right? The in-housing has after-sale service around technology and keeping up to date in technology, and people, because people like to work on broader portfolios than just one. So you always have churn on people. So there is after-sale service. So that's the second. And the third one is first-party data.
Sitting on first-party data, Josh being the lone retailer up here, sitting on that data, what's that experience been like? Both you bringing non-endemic and endemic advertisers to your users?
Yeah, I mean, when we started this back in 2016, but I looked at, I was at Orbitz early on when we kind of started our commerce marketing programs there, and took some of the learnings, some of the wins and some of the losses, and tried to apply it to Fanatics. And one of the wins was working within the endemic space with our vendors and licensees. Received the least amount of pushback internally. We can obviously contextually leverage information for the vendors and licensees, and that was, and then there was also internal, just education on what we're doing, why we're doing it, what the value is to our vendors, even to our buyers. Like, hey, the more we're marketing these products and delivering higher sell-through, the more you're gonna have to go buy more product from New Era or from a Nike. And so that was, low-hanging fruit, if you will. But then as we started to dive into, the non-endemic space of working with other brands that work in sports, such as the T-Mobiles, Dr. Pepper's of the world, Dunkin' Donuts, took a lot of education as to what the value of our audience was, what the value of our platform was, how you could work with us. And so there's internal education and knowledge sharing. But then also, I mean, knocking on the doors of agencies and brand direct of saying, hey, like, we have a valuable audience of sports fans, same people that are in stadium on Sundays watching NFL games. You know, they come to our sites, and just delivering on not just the idea, but then on the execution of the programs.
Cookies officially, as of January 4th, it started. So cookies are going away. Coming from Epsilon, how does this impact you and commerce media with, I mean, we all know this is going to happen, but now it's official. How is this impacting you guys for this year and beyond?
Well, we're ready. You know, I think that's one of the really interesting things about Epsilon is we've been getting ready for a while. Like really the initial company of Datomi was based on identity and data and things like that. So for 14 years, you know, been getting ready, not knowing this was going to happen, but really understanding that data, privacy, and all those things were going to be really, really important. So I think, you know, I think we're ready. I don't think, like you were saying, that our clients are. And when we've had some client symposiums and we've talked to different clients, there's, you know, we ask them, you know, are you ready? And, you know, look, I would say a year ago they weren't as worried, but now they're panicked to a certain degree. And they're really looking to partners like Epsilon to help them through this, right? And really trying to secure their first party data, having technology to house that, making sure that there's a ton of privacy and things that are involved in that. So we feel really confident.
So one of the big promises of retail media is this full funnel attribution. Jay, I'm wondering, are you seeing that? Do you believe in that? Do you think that that's achievable? I'd love to get your take on that.
Not a measurement expert,
Okay.
but I would say the biggest discussion that we hear from our clients are that you end up talking about, and by the way, when you're talking about retail media, part of what I was saying earlier on education, all this is, you're talking to a lot of different parts of the organization that you weren't talking to before. So the quote head of media doesn't necessarily control a lot of the retail media budgets. It could be in the sales organization, shopper, trade, et cetera. So each of those folks, depending on the company, has different remits and thoughts. Incrementality, I think, is really important here, and how much of the sales that you're generating would have happened anyway, right? And some of that you could say about all of advertising and marketing, and how much did you actually impact. But there's better data now than there's ever been before, and I think we will get there. It's very difficult to unpack how much retail media specifically impacted that specific sale versus upper funnel or end cap and sort of whatever, right? Anything that's going on, and I think it's yet to be seen how that works. But there's no question the ability to measure in that space and the ability for retailers and brands to point to real ROI is more focused in that channel than anything else. I mean, search obviously is like that as well, but
where is this budget coming from? $45 billion last year. Is this incremental budget that brands are now seeing this as a powerful channel and they're willing to spend more advertising budget, or is it taking away from traditional or taking even away from other, programmatic or search or social? What are you seeing, or what's, no right answer here, but just curious to your thoughts.
I don't see a lot of our clients' budgets growing a whole lot, right?
Yeah.
So I think that they're making decisions based on how are things working, what kind of return on investment or ROAS are they getting, and I think that that's how they're making their decisions, right? But it's coming from, I would say, some more traditional media, like you were talking about, print scheme coming down, right? The linear TV.
If linear's down 10 or 14x sports, Disney and Fox might be 2 or 3 or 4% last year. And if it's going to happen again, I mean, the balloon is being squeezed there.
Even more.
It's going to digital and retail and the like. That's where it's coming from.
And I think clients are struggling with that, right? Like, where do they put their money? How do they apply it? And again, that's why the agencies and the partners are helping them with that.
Yeah, but I didn't go through the point. I remember the Nestle case, but their discounts were more, I think were twice, when we pitched the business a long time ago, when we pitched the media business, their discount budget was about 2 or 3 times bigger than their ad budget. Mm-hmm.
Right, of course.
So if it was 2 billion ad budget, they were discounting 4, 5, 6 billion. So they hated that. I mean, they hated giving away that money. And I think that's where it's coming from. You know, it's trying to balance that as well.
Yeah.
That's what the manufacturers will do.
Agreed, and I would definitely say for the type of customers that we work with, which generally are not D2C sort of digital native brands at the holding company level, whose budgets are growing depending on the business. For us, I mean, there isn't more money,
Right.
generally speaking, some categories, but for the most part, there's not. So I would, traditional media, but also we are seeing migration from search because there's so much similarity between search and the way it's bought and sponsored products and the way it's measured and all the rest of it. It's not like search is, plummeting.
The one thing we
but
saw
it's-
last year, though, was when they increased prices, like Pepsi in Q2, I think its top line was up 15%, and its ad budgets were up by 15%. So they fixed their ad budgets in nominal dollars. If they get the price increases, which they've been getting, now where did that money go? Well, it went into the digital platforms because they're going to be up. We haven't seen Q4, but it looks as though on average they'll be up 10%. I mean, Amazon will be 20 plus, but even Meta in Q3 was up 25% on ad revenues. So it's gone into digital ad revenues. It's obviously gone into retail media. It's gone into connected TV. It's gone into the streamers now. Netflix and Disney have got advertising models, despite the fact it was against Reed Hastings' religion. And so I think that's where the money's gone. I mean, it's linear down,
Yep.
and it's gone into these areas.
Yeah. And those two types of companies, though, have different problems. One of them is offsetting a melting iceberg with a smaller business that's growing, but a much smaller business versus just growth business. And therefore, the competition is real and challenging.
You guys were 2 weeks into 2024. What are the biggest challenges that you're seeing specific to commerce media coming into this year? Josh, we're going to start with you down there.
Yeah, I mean, I think, gosh, there's two lenses to look at this through. I mean, one is just our Fanatics lens and, just aligning the organization around what we're doing and then, articulating that to the market. But, right now, because we've been such a high growth area of the business, we're trying to fly the plane and build at the same time. And that's hard sometimes. So I think, for us, we just need to continue to be as client-facing as possible and communicating about, all the positive benefits to commerce media, specifically within the Fanatics platform. Then also take feedback and listen to, what have we been doing well? Where can we do better? And I'd say that's kind of how we're approaching 2024.
What about you, Suzanne?
Yeah, I think it's really, again, back to the client, really trying to understand what is their strategy when it comes to this. How do they fit it into the current kind of advertising programs they have, portfolio? How do they measure it? How do they know it's really, driving the results that they want to drive? So I think that, it's again, taking that step back and really trying to help them understand, where this can fit into it and how and it is the future, right? It's the evolution. We continue to evolve where the advertising dollars go as technology takes off and all those things happen. We've got to be agile and nimble and being able to help them figure that out as well.
I think there's getting, from a buy-side perspective, synthesizing a story. There's a lot of tools and tactics out there, but really having a holistic sort of end-to-end capability story is important. Susan and I work a lot on that together with our teams from a publicist perspective. But also on the client side, like I was saying, because there's so many different stakeholders in this space versus sort of just traditional media or even digital media, making sure we're talking to the right people with that story. And, we've seen a lot of changes. Who controls the budget isn't the same. And even there are people on the client side that are overseeing retail media businesses, sell-side businesses that are also the media buyer, right? And that's a very different role. That role didn't exist that long ago. So I think it's navigating all that and bringing it together and making sure that there's consistent understanding is still not a solved problem.
Martin.
Yeah, I think 24 is still going to be a difficult year because there are 70 elections taking place affecting 4.2 billion people on the planet. So it's half the population of the planet. So the uncertainties are huge, quite apart from the geopolitical stuff, which is pretty horrendous at the moment. We're here in Las Vegas, and it's almost like disembodied, really, isn't it?
Yep.
From reality. So, but this year is different because last year people were worried about interest rates rising, clients. Now they're not worried. They think it's going to go down. So I think the general environment is better than last year, but it's still risk averse. And that means the short-term lower funnel, mid-funnel, however you want to describe it, activation and performance activities are going to become, in my view, even more important. So these areas that we're talking about where we saw growth last year, we're probably going to become more. I mean, I think that's just, and private equity, when you think about it, I was listening to a tape this morning, they did 40% of transactions at the margin the year before last. Last year it was about 20%. And they expected to go back to that level. They've raised a lot of dry powder. They have about 2.7 trillion of equity and you're seeing it in the UK because the markets are undervalued, so they're money in. So I think private equity has the horizons of 4 or 5 years, so they tend to be short term too. So I think everything moves towards that. So measurement, activation, performance become short term, for good or evil.
Focus
becomes more and more important.
I just want to thank all of you for joining us.
You guys.
It was amazing. Thanks for town. Appreciate it. I want to thank all of you for coming out here. I know it's a busy week, so just want to thank you all and enjoy the rest of your CES.
Thank you. Yeah, you too.